Welcome back to Scholastic IQ, the game where knowledge rules. Our Halloween episode today where our kids are scary smart. I'm your host, Ethan Neer. And let's get in with meeting our teams. On the bottom, we have Carterville with Nick, Ursa, Ava, and Gabe. And on the top, we have Fortitude with Ezekiel, Blake, Andrew, and Jacob. Now, before we get into our questions, let's go over our rules. So I'm going to ask you guys a series of toss-up questions. And then if you get it right, you'll have a chance to answer a bonus question. If you get that wrong, the other team has a chance to steal. You can interrupt me at any time, but it will be 5 points to the other team if you get that question wrong. So do the best you can, and don't be wrong, as Ethan would say. All right, let's get into the questions. What American chemist defined acids as substances capable of donating an electron pair and its namesake of diagrams that depict electrons as dots?
What's Lewis?
That is correct. All right, Fortitude, for your first bonus question, the outdoor sculptures Endless Column and the Table of Silence are by what Romanian sculptor of the series Bird in Space?
Kafka.
That is incorrect. Carterville, a chance to steal. All right, we were looking for Konstantin Brinkush. On to our next toss-up question. What Egyptian god who replaced Montu as the patron deity of Thebes was identified with Jupiter and Zeus and was famously fused with the sun god Ra?
What's Atman?
That is correct. All right, on to our next bonus. The Tour de France traditionally ends along what street in Paris, whose western end is at the Arc de Triomphe?
Rue de Jacob.
That is incorrect. Carterville, a chance to steal. All right, that's all the time we have. We were looking for the Champs-Élysées. Champs-Élysées. Our next toss-up question, what emperor ruled as his country conquered Burma and the Philippines, established Manchukuo, and lost to the Allies in the Pacific World War II?
Hirohito.
That is correct. All right, Carterville, your first bonus question. What state has a uniquely pennant-shaped flag featuring 5 red and white stripes and 17 white stars?
Ohio.
That is correct. Our next toss-up question, what English poet included a poison tree in his collection Songs of Experience and described the fearful symmetry?
What's Blake?
That is correct. All right, your next bonus question, pencil and paper ready. What is the smallest positive even number that is divisible by both 3 and 7?
That'd be 42.
Okay, 42.
That is correct. All right, our next toss-up question, what country, which contains most of the Apennine Mountains, is home to an active volcano on Stromboli Island and Mount Etna on Sicily?
Italy.
That is correct. All right, Carterville, your bonus question is, what 1947 book by Margaret Wise Brown describes an old lady whispering in hush in a great green room and is a classic bedtime story? Sorry, you were all out of time. Fortitude, a chance to steal?
Goodnight Moon.
That is correct. A classic. All right, our next toss-up, a letter to Lorenzo di Medici, opens what book that compares rulers to lions and foxes, warns against flatteries, and is by Niccolo Machiavelli?
What's The Prince?
That is correct. For your bonus question, in 2020, Mark Meadows held what position later held by Ron Klain, which often described as a gatekeeper for the president?
What's the chief of staff?
Defer to Zeke.
Chief of Staff.
That is correct. Our next toss-up, what conspiracy, which is commemorated by Bonfire Night every November 5th?
What is Guy Fawkes Day?
That is incorrect, and it will be 5 points to the other team. What conspiracy, which commemorated the Bonfire Night every November 5th, was failed plot by Catholics, including a Guy Fawkes to blow up Parliament?
5th of November.
That is incorrect. We were looking for the gunpowder plot. Gunpowder plot. Our next toss-up, what organ expresses large amounts of cytochrome P450 enzymes to metabolize drugs, make fat emulsifying bile, and lies beneath the diaphragm?
The gallbladder.
That is incorrect.
What is the liver?
That is correct. For your bonus question, a woman in the far future named Weena belongs to what group of small beings who were preyed upon by Morlocks in H.G. Wells' novel, The Time Machine?
Aliens.
Say it one more time.
Aliens.
Oh, no, that is incorrect. We're looking for Eloy. Eloy. Our next toss-up question, in what African country did All Progressives Congress candidate Bola Tinubu succeed Muhammadu Buhari as president at a 2023 inauguration in Abuja?
South Sudan?
That is incorrect.
Tanzania.
That's also incorrect. We were looking for Nigeria. Nigeria. Our next toss-up, what NFL team, which was led by quarterback Bart Starr and coach Vince Lombardi to win in the first Super Bowl, plays at Lambeau Field in Wisconsin?
Green Bay Packers.
That is correct. For your bonus, Carterville, what Revolutionary War officer's use of guerrilla tactics against the British led him to be nicknamed the Swamp Fox?
Smith.
That is incorrect. Fortitude, a chance to steal?
Daniel Morgan.
That is also incorrect. We were looking for Francis Marion. Francis Marion. All right, our next toss-up question. Big Cypress National Preserve is part of what wetlands region extending southward from Lake Okeechobee?
What is the Everglades?
That is correct. All right, Fortitude, for your bonus question. Cassie pretends to be a ghost to escape the plantation of what villainous character who orders Uncle Tom's death in a Harriet Beecher Stowe novel?
What?
Uncle Tom's Cabin.
That is incorrect. Carterville, chance to steal. You're all out of time. The answer we were looking for was Simon Legree. Simon Legree. A good Halloween question about ghosts. All right, on to our next. Pencil and paper ready. What is the slope of the line defined by the equation 2x plus y equals 7?
What is -2?
That is correct. All right, Fortune, your bonus question is, what analytical technique typically uses a magnetic field to separate molecules based on their M to Z ratio?
Electromagnetic substitution.
That is incorrect. Carterville, a chance to steal.
Electromagnetism.
That is also incorrect. We were looking for mass spectrometry. Mass spectrometry. Our next toss-up, what empire, whose Jaguar and Eagle warriors fought ritual flower wars, ruled from Tenochtitlan until it was conquered by...
Aztec?
That is correct. For your bonus question, what Spanish word names the centuries-long conflict that ended in 1492 when Ferdinand and Isabella captured the Moorish city of Granada?
Ganassia.
You're all out of time. Carterville, a chance to steal.
Reconquista.
That is correct. On to our next toss-up question. What playwright depicted Harry Hope's saloon in The Iceman Cometh and wrote about the fracturing Tyrone family in Long Day's Journey into Night?
Tennessee Williams.
That is incorrect. Sorry, we're out of time. The answer we were looking for was Eugene O'Neill. Eugene Gladstone O'Neill. Our next toss-up question, what word that harms Monty Python's Knights Who Say Knee also names a two-part film set in Maine that features Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise the Clown?
Knee?
That is incorrect.
It.
That is correct. All right, Carterville, for your bonus question, pencil and paper ready. What is the fifth term of a geometric sequence whose first term is 2 and whose third term is 10?
$18.
That is incorrect. Fortitude, a chance to steal?
$20.
That is also incorrect. The answer we're looking for was 50. 50. On to our next toss-up question. Which country that declared independence in the cry of Ipiranga was ruled...
What is Brazil?
That is correct. All right, Fortitude, your next bonus question. In 2023, what country led by Yoko Widodo was worked with SpaceX on the Satria-1 satellite, which will boost internet access for its 280 million residents?
Okay.
Defer to Zeke.
Turkey.
That is incorrect. Carterville, a chance to steal.
Indonesia.
That is correct. All right, our next toss-up question, continuing our space theme. What's constellation, which contains the M87 black hole and the star Spica, lies between Leo and Libra in the zodiac and depicts a maiden?
What's Virgo?
That is correct. For your bonus question, in Jonathan Swift's novel Gulliver's Travels, the tiny residents of what country argue over how to crack eggs and go to war with the nearby Blefuscu?
It's a little.
The Lilliputians.
That is correct. Our next toss-up, what novel whose protagonist marries Auda after winning a bet at the Reform Club with help from Passepartout was written in French by Jules Verne?
Around the World in 80 Days.
That is correct. If anyone's seen the Journey to the Center of the Earth movies, and they're very good, Jules Verne. For your bonus question, for years, Mary Mallon was quarantined on New York's North Brother Island to prevent her from spreading what infectious disease described as a fever?
Typhoid Mary.
Typhoid Mary.
That is correct. And with that, we're going to take it to our lightning round. So we'll check our scores. Fortitude, you are ahead with 200 points, and Carterville is trailing with 85. So since Carterville is trailing, you guys will get to pick your category first. The options are World Literary Characters, Pacific Islands, Mascots, and Ends in U.
Ends in U.
All right. So you guys will have a minute to answer as many questions in this category as possible. You can pass a question, and I will circle back to it if we have time. All right, so this category is Ends in U. Name these words that end with the letter U. And I'll count you guys down in 3, 2, 1. List of dishes available at a restaurant.
And U.
That is correct. 5-letter French word for goodbye.
Adieu.
That is correct. Large Australian flightless bird.
Emu.
That is correct. Flat region within a mountainous area.
Plateau.
That is correct. Greek letter before xi.
Mu.
That is correct. Swampy Creek in the southern U.S.
Bayou.
That is correct. Coffee-flavored Italian dessert whose name means pick-me-up.
Tiramisu.
That is correct. Adjective meaning unplanned.
Pass. Impromptu.
That's correct. Popular Linux distribution developed by Canonical.
Pass.
Word formed by merging the start and end of two other words.
Portmanteau.
That is correct. Popular Linux distribution developed by Canonical. This is the last one. Popular Linux. All right, I think you guys got all of them right except that one. The popular Linux distribution developed by Canonical was Ubuntu. Ubuntu. All right, very good job, guys. All right, so next we have the categories left are world literary characters, Pacific Islands, or mascots.
World literary characters.
All right. So again, you guys will have a minute to answer as many as you can, and you can pass, and we'll circle back. So world literary characters. Name the non-American author who created these literary characters. And I'll count you guys down in 3, 2, 1. The unfaithful Anna Karenina.
Pass.
The hunchback Quasimodo.
Pass.
Hedda Gabler, the title figure of a Norwegian play.
Pass.
The handmaid Offred.
Pass.
Raskolnikov, who kills a pawnbroker.
Pass.
The Shining Prince Genji.
Pass.
Colonel Aureliano Buendia.
Pass.
Dr. Yuri Zavago.
Pass.
Hecker Lisbeth Salander.
Pass.
Mr. Beeswax, who builds a house.
Pass.
The unfaithful Anna
Dostoevsky.
Karenina. That is correct. The hunchback Quasimodo.
Pass.
Hedda Gabler, the figure of a Norwegian play. All right, we'll go over the ones you guys missed. These were pretty difficult. The hunchback Quasimodo was Victor Hugo. Hedda Gabler, the title figure of a Norwegian play, is Henrik Ibsen. The handmaid Offred is Margaret Atwood, The Handmaid's Tale. Raskolnikov, who kills a pawnbroker, was Fyodor Dostoevsky in Crime and Punishment. The Shining Prince Genji was Lady Murasaki, or in the Tale of Genji. Colonel Aureliano Buendia was Gabriel Garcia Marquez in 100 Years of Solitude. Dr. Yuri Zhivago was Boris Pasternak in Dr. Zhivago. Hacker Lisbeth Salander was Stieg Larsson in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And Mr. Beeswax, who builds a house, was V.S. Naipaul in A House for Mr. Beeswax. So those were pretty difficult, but good job, guys. So let's check our scores. So we have Fortitude still leading with 410 and Carterville at 175. Pretty close, guys, but we do still have half our question left. So it's anybody's game. 210. So sorry. 210 to 175. All right. Now back to our toss-up questions. What novel we already did that one. What leader who co-wrote the 2023 children's book Climate Change is married to Camilla Parker Bowles and is the ruling king of England?
King Charles.
King Charles what?
The Sixth.
That is incorrect.
King Charles III.
That is correct. All right, Carterville, for your bonus question, what African country where the 7-million-year-old Sahelanthropus fossil was found lies south of Libya and was governed from N'Djamena?
Chad.
That is correct. Our next toss-up, what war in which a UN landing at Incheon was led by Douglas MacArthur?
What is the Korean War?
That is correct. Fortitude, for your bonus question, what Castilian saint established the Order of Preachers, also known as the Black Friars, in 1216?
St. Francis.
That is incorrect. Carterville, chance to steal.
Saint Dominic.
That is correct. Our next toss-up, what term, which is translated as Brücke in German and Pont in French, denotes a structure such as the Sydney Harbor and Golden Gate ones?
What's the bridge?
That is correct. For your bonus question, at what 2021 US Open, Russian Daniil Medvedev was booed during his championship point, which denied what other tennis player a calendar Grand Slam?
No answer.
Carterville, a chance to steal. All right, we're all out of time. The answer we're looking for was Novak Djokovic. On to our next toss-up question. What author who wrote about a man who dies of hypothermia in his story To Build a Fire depicted a canine protagonist in the Yukon in White Fang?
Who's Jack London?
That is correct. For your bonus question, what Greek hero used the help of Medea to retrieve the Golden Fleece?
I'll defer to Andrew.
Jason.
That is correct. Our next toss-up, what SI-derived unit is equal to 1 volt ampere or 1 joule per second, measures power?
Watt.
That is correct. All right, Carterville, for your bonus question, Hittite King Muwatalli II and Ramses the Great signed the Eternal Treaty after what 1274 BC battle fought near the Orontes River?
Battle of the Orontes.
That is incorrect. Fortitude, a chance to steal.
Battle of the Two Kingdoms.
That is also incorrect. We were looking for the Battle of Kadesh. Our next toss-up question, what rapper says he knows his whole backs to these ropes and describes vomit on...
Eminem.
That is correct. For your bonus question, Fortitude, what 7-letter term can refer to the total weight or total dry weight of all living matter in a given area?
Gravity.
That is incorrect. Carterville, chance to steal.
Biomass.
That is correct. Our next toss-up, what president who was accused of cruelty in the coffin handbills unseated John Quincy Adams in 1828?
Andrew Jackson.
That is correct. For your bonus question, William Shatner became the oldest person in space after a trip in the New Shepard rocket, which is operated by what company owned by Jeff Bezos?
Blue Origin.
That is correct. Our next toss-up question, what quantity whose change is known as impulse is conserved in all collisions is denoted
Buzz.
P?
What is momentum?
That is correct. Now for your bonus, which 13th century Mongol ruler founded the Yuan dynasty, launched 2 invasions of Japan, and was visited by Marco Polo?
Kublai Khan.
That is correct. Our next toss-up, what power granted by the Constitution's Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1?
What is executive order?
That is incorrect. And I will read the whole question. What power granted in the Constitution's Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 is invoked when the president grants clemency for a criminal conviction?
Pardon.
That is correct. Carterville, for your bonus, what man who had an open relationship with fellow existentialist Simone de Beauvoir included the statement, hell is other people, in his play No Exit? All right, Fortitude, a chance to steal.
Defer to Blake.
Satyr.
Will we accept that?
I can spell it. Satyr.
That is incorrect. We're looking for Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre. So close, so close. Our next toss-up. What industry, which in 1820 was shaken by the Essex disaster, involved the use of the try-work to render oil from sea creatures that were harpooned?
Hunting of whales.
Yes, that is correct. For your bonus, Skye and Iona are islands in which archipelago off the western coast of Scotland?
Isle of Man.
That is incorrect. Carterville, a chance to steal.
Isle of Skye.
That is also incorrect. We were looking for Hebrides. Our next toss-up question, are pencils and paper ready yet again? What is the sum of all internal angles of a convex pentagon, given that it could be partitioned into 3 triangles?
540.
That is correct. All right, Carterville, for your bonus. What cells, which have regulatory and helper forms, are white blood cells that help eliminate infected cells?
T cells.
That is correct. And unfortunately, that is all the time we have left on our spooky episode of Scholastic Haiku. Now let's take a look at our scores. So on top, we do have Fortitude with 340 points and Carterville trailing not too far behind with 280. Good job to all of our teams and everyone behind the camera. I'm Ethan Neer. Have a good night.